Hi guys, nice to see you again. Today we're going to be talking with someone about her experience, and we're going to call it a journey back, a story of healing and a story of forgiveness. I know that that's not an easy thing to do. That's something that a lot of us have a lot of issue with. It's not easy to forgive. But if she can forgive, we can all forgive. So I'm going to start by asking her a couple of questions. She's going to stay anonymous, so it's just going to be me and her nice shoulder. Okay. So start at the beginning with your abandonment.
Well, the story goes that when I was 2 years old, I have two sisters, and we were out in the country in a house, and my mom decided that she could no longer take the daily stresses of caring for her children and the relationship with her husband, and so she decided to leave on her birthday. And I have to realize in my heart that it had to have been such a terrible situation for her to leave in the circumstances that she did, because of the fact that when she left, the story I've been told is that it was an actual blizzard, and she had to walk up over a mountain to even get into town, to civilization. So I just, even though I can't remember that exact day or that exact moment or anything like that, the stories that I've been told, it just has to have been a bad situation. Mm-hmm. And through me growing up, the one thing I could never understand was how a mother could leave her children. Mm-hmm. I just don't comprehend that. And because I have children of my own, and I could never imagine leaving them.
I
just can't imagine ever leaving them. And so one day, as an adult, going through the whole healing process, it was time to confront her and just find out what the situation was. Mm-hmm. And so I called her up on the phone, and kind of crazy, because one of the things that I used to always think about was, how could you leave a 2-year-old, and was I potty trained? Because if I wasn't potty trained, was I sitting in a diaper all day until somebody came and took care of me? Or, was I able to go to the bathroom? That just really bothered me.
Stuck with you.
I don't understand why, but it just did. And so anyways, I called her and I asked her if I was potty trained. I never really got an answer to that question. Mm-hmm. And then I asked her, why? Why did you leave? And I will never in my life forget the response I got. Because I don't know where she's at. I don't know where she's coming from, but her response, and she said to me, I never said I was the motherly type. Mm. And so I thought to myself, why did you continue to have children then?
Right.
Why give birth to children that you're never going to care for?
Right.
So was it really the situation we lived in, or was it really just her
selfishness?
I will never know. Mm-hmm. But those words have just stuck with me throughout the rest of my life. I never said I was the motherly type.
When you have children, you don't have that option.
Right.
To be the motherly type. You are a mother. So after that, obviously that was a huge part of your, that was the beginning of the hurt.
Correct.
Because even if you don't remember it as a 2-year-old, you surely realize that as you're growing up and getting older and knowing that your mother's not there.
Right.
So then comes in your stepmother.
Yes. Well, she wasn't my stepmother at the time. She was my father's girlfriend. Mm-hmm. And we, in the meantime, prior to her coming into the picture, had lived with a bunch of different relatives. And at the time she came into the picture that I remember, we were at that time living with my grandparents. And the incident that I remember most is, and I must think about myself, like, who really was I, you know, or who am I? Because I think I have this inquisitive mind that I just really never comprehended that I have.
Mhm.
Because as a child, I used to sit and pick apart dolls' hair,
Mhm.
like just pull it out of the head just to see how it was put together.
Mhm.
Like, do people really do that?
Yeah. Boys do that now. When they're mechanical, they'll take truck apart because they want to see exactly how it got put together.
Right.
Mhm.
So I can remember sitting on the front porch of my grandmother's house, and I was pulling out the doll's hair, and I was checking them out, and it's pretty amazing that on the top of a doll's head, there's a bunch of tiny little holes, and somehow they get these little strands of hair stuck down in these holes and stuff. But my grandmother wasn't very happy with the fact that I was pulling out the doll's hair. And so basically what happened, the incident that I remember, is that she took me inside the house, and she said to me,
Now, who's this?
my grandmother,
Your grandmother. Okay. Mom's mom or Dad's mom?
Dad,
Dad's mom. Okay.
and she said to me, she's like, this is what happens to little girls when they destroy property.
Mhm.
And she took my hands, and she placed them on top of an old kerosene heater that heated our house at the time.
Mhm.
And she placed them there to the point where they actually got burnt. And they were burnt so bad that they had to put salve on them and bandage them up and stuff, and because of the healing process and everything.
Mhm.
And I just remember her saying afterwards that she was so sorry that she didn't mean for it to actually get that bad, you know, but it had, you know. And so here I am, just like, you know, a couple years old, and I have these big bandages on my hands because the skin is all peeled off from the burning of it. And so my dad's girlfriend, I guess she came home from work, like, again, you know, I'm only a couple years old, so I don't really remember every detail.
Right.
But she saw what happened, and she said that she wanted to keep us safe, and so she went and rented a house with, of all people, my mother. And so the two of them lived together, and they...
The mother and the girlfriend.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they lived together, and they took us in, and she was supposed to be our caretaker, and like one was supposed to be watching us while the other one was at work, and you know, trying to help each other out and stuff. That was the scenario. But I don't think that that's really the way the story went, because from the story that I got, again, this is hearsay. So from the story I got, my mother was very quickly evicted because of her doings, that, you know, things that she was involved with and stuff, and so now my mom, or my dad's girlfriend, was our primary caretaker.
Mhm.
And things were, you know, seemed pretty normal.
Where was your dad at this point?
He was in prison.
And why was he in prison?
You
don't know?
Not for sure.
Okay. You just know he was there.
From stories, again, I think it was armed robbery.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. That's great.
This is life.
Yeah.
So he was in prison, and now the girlfriend is taking care of you. And at that point, you felt comfortable.
Yeah.
You felt okay, like...
Yeah. I can't remember in the beginning of, you know, that time frame of anything that was out of the ordinary or that shouldn't be happening, or, you know. And I don't actually remember my mom being there. That's just stories.
You just know it.
Yeah.
When did things change with your stepmother? Girlfriend, but turned into stepmother.
Yeah, pretty much I can remember things changing when my dad got out of prison.
Okay.
Yeah, when he came back home. And things just went from bad to worse when you could never know if you were doing something right or wrong. You know, you always were on guard, and the punishments just, well, in that house, the punishments were usually being locked in the basement, and they would just, like, lock us in the basement, and then there was like the top of the steps, and then we would stand there and cry and stuff, and sometimes they just didn't like hearing us cry, and but you could still feel safe because there was a light underneath the door, and so as long as you saw that light, there was hope that you were going to get out. But sometimes I think they either caught on or they just didn't want to hear us crying, and so they would send us down in the coal bin. But the coal bin always had, I don't know what the word is that I'm looking for, but it always had a negative connotation to it in the sense that we were told horrible stories about rats being in there, and we had to be careful about where we went or where we walked, and because if we weren't careful, then the rats would come out and bite us and stuff like this. And whether it was just to torment us or,
It was tormenting you.
Right.
They were mentally abusing you on top of the...
Right.
Yeah.
So,
to really make it...
Scary. And as a little child, you're going to be afraid of that.
Of course.
So we would have to stand down in the coal bin, and the coal bin was pitch black. There was no light down there. And to top it off, like, I don't know how it is these days because I don't have a coal furnace, but we used to have a coal furnace, and they make some horrid noises. So when you're standing in the coal bin, it's not really funny, but looking back on it, like, you're hearing all these horrible sounds from this coal furnace and standing in the coal bin and being afraid, and so then you have like all these other thoughts going on in your head that you're never going to survive, you're never going to get out of here, you're never going to do this or that, and so eventually you would get out.
Who initiated these punishments? Why do you think it started when your dad got home? Because
I can't even.
You don't even
I have
know.
no idea. Yeah.
Something changed.
Right.
Okay.
I honestly think, looking back on the situation, I think in her mind she was originally protecting us, but the relationship became more about her and my dad, and we were an interference, and so she really couldn't do anything about the situation.
Right.
We were there, but at the same time, we were an annoyance to her, and so I can't, that's just speculation. I can't really say for sure.
But I think that's a good, thought process. That sounds, logical that would be.
Right.
So, in your mind, when you're being taken down to the coal bin and put in there, at this point, is this like worst case scenario? As far as the abuse is concerned, was that how it started?
Yes.
So that's how it started. Okay. And then what was the next step for them? What stepped it up a notch?
Well, in that house, that was pretty much, I guess the next step would have been the beatings. I don't remember too many beatings in that house. 2 incidents occurred. I was very inquisitive. I really was.
And kids are inquisitive.
There was a can of black paint sitting in the bedroom, and let's see what the paint does. And so I got the paintbrush out, and there was a dresser sitting there. And so
You were going to paint it.
I did. I thought I was being helpful. So that didn't go over very well.
No.
Not at all. And I can sit and laugh at it now just because, like, I see the innocence of it as a child, but the abuse that came afterwards was not so innocent. And so I think that's when the beatings began, is sometime around that time when school started and stuff. And I think the biggest another incident that happened is I started playing with matches, and I caught the kitchen on fire one day. And of course I got in trouble for that.
Well, yeah.
That's very serious. But I think the biggest incident that happened in regards to my stepmom, because by that time she was my stepmom, was one day I went to school and they were having some kind of program or something about health and eating, and and I made a very innocent comment to the teacher about our food at our house, and apparently she called home, and I am not sure what exactly conspired between that conversation. I will never know. But I know that when I walked home for lunch that day, I had food thrown at me, and I was told never to get up from that table until I had finished eating all of my food. And the look on her face was just sheer, I want to say evil, but it was just sheer, I don't even know. Yes, very good. It was like she was so irate about what I had done to say something to the teacher about food, which really, in my eyes, was very innocent comment. You know, it was just misconstrued or misinterpreted. And that evening, she told me, she said, when your father gets home, we will be discussing this. And she said, don't ever, ever tell people that we have no food in our house again. And so, like, immediately I felt like I couldn't trust saying anything to anybody because somehow it got back to people who were taking care of us, you know?
Right.
And so there was this sense of insecurity. There was a sense of not being able to trust. And I think that may have been the moment that just...
A defining moment.
Yeah. Because, like, all of a sudden, it wasn't safe to talk to the teachers in school. And, you know, because it would get back home. And I didn't even know what I had said that was wrong.
Right.
You know?
So then you were afraid to say anything.
Right.
And then when your dad got home, did that result in a beating?
Yes. So...
Who inflicted the beatings?
Both? Usually he did.
Okay.
Yeah, usually he did. I don't remember her actually beating us too much.
So how...
was more mental.
Which is worse sometimes.
Yeah.
What was your feelings like at that time? Like, was resentment starting to build up in you, or anger, or...
I don't think I ever felt resentful until later. Like,
At time, you probably didn't know that there was any difference.
I maybe had just started first grade by that point. So I was only like 5 or 6 years old. You know, I was still little.
Right.
I don't know that you understand those feelings of resentment.
And when you're 5 or 6.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So, yeah.
When did that move on to the next level?
When we moved.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I think that what changed was the fact that they now had a baby of their own together. And I really think the annoyance on her part is just like, well, you're not my children. I think now she had a child of her own, and we didn't belong there.
So she was over it.
Yeah. I mean, she never, ever said that to us, to our face. But there was a moment in time that I overheard a conversation, and I heard her tell my father that you either need to make a decision, it's either them or me, and if you don't choose me, I'll be taking the boys and leaving.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they ended up having more than one child.
Yeah, that was, you know, a couple of years later, but I think that was the separation of her caring for us. I think something in her changed, you know, and it just really became more about inflicting abuse. Like, that's just what it was. And when we moved to the country, our lives just became a whirlwind of one disaster after another. Like, it was the uncertainty of life, is a good way of putting it. Because from one moment to the next, you never knew what was coming, ever.
What do you think incited that in your dad?
I think, again, this is just assuming or making assumptions, that I think he wanted to make that relationship work so bad that he felt he had to do whatever he had to do, you know. Again, I can't really speak for him because I don't know what was going on in his life. I don't know his background, where he came from, what would make him, you know, the way he was.
Well, just a little bit about what you said about your grandmother. Maybe he was abused, and that happens a lot.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and you don't have to know.
Yeah.
You can just tell us what your perception was.
Yeah.
And you are allowed to express that. You're allowed to express what you felt, because this is your story.
Right.
So, okay, so now it gets to a level where the abuse is taken on a new name.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe just talk about one of the incidences to kind of show where that went, and then we'll move on to, maybe the point where you were able to get out.
The abuse with my father or the abuse with my stepmother?
Both.
All right, the abuse with my stepmother. We'll start with that one. That had taken on a different twist. Because somewhere along the way, she must have been very insecure with her relationship. And she approached me one day. We were outside hanging up clothes, and she approached me one day, and she asked me if my father had ever touched me in an inappropriate way.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just completely baffled. Like, why would you ask me that? Like, no,
Right.
He's never, done anything like that. And she said to me that, well, you need to be aware of the fact that at one point he was involved with an inappropriate relationship with his cousin. And that goes back to the time when my mom left.
Okay.
So, refreshing my mind now into the entire story, that's what my mom said was happening when she left.
Okay.
So anyways, so she was telling me the story, but of course I was still young, and I didn't fully understand the whole concept of that.
How old were you?
About. I'm going to say, probably 10 or 11. And so basically what happened after that is she called my sister and I upstairs. And, when you're called, you knew that there was something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So, the fact that we were both summoned was okay, what do we do now?
Mm-hmm.
By this time the abuse was so regular that we just really lived in fear of ever being summoned.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so she called us upstairs, but there didn't seem to be anything that was really wrong. She just started talking to us about growing up and relationships and what would be happening to us in our teenage years and, just your normal mother-daughter conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But then it took a twist.
Mm-hmm.
And, you ready for this? Do you know this? I don't know what you shared and what you didn't. But it took a twist, and she started telling us to do things to each other that just wasn't right. And then she asked us if it felt good. And we were just kind of dumbfounded. What do you, what's
Right.
it supposed to feel like? We're like little kids. We have no idea what we're doing. And so at that moment was when I think she crossed the line. At that moment was when I can honestly say that she sexually abused us. She molested us.
Mm-hmm.
To teach us what it was supposed to be like when we're having sex with other people,
Mm-hmm.
And
what do you think her thought process was? Can you perceive that at all now?
Looking back, it's very terrible to say this, but I think she was out to destroy any line of truth or belief that if we said something that somebody would believe us. How could somebody ever believe, something that you would say it was so just off the wall and so
Yeah.
just, I believe that she was somehow out to destroy our lives in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
And
to confuse you and show you bizarre things that I can
don't
understand
understand why a woman would do. I don't understand.
Satan.
But, anyways, it went from there to the point where she would take me, not sure what happened to my sisters, but she would take me to the bus driver's house. And at the bus driver's house, he would sexually abuse me also. And it got so bad that I was afraid to ride the bus. And so on days when there was nobody else at the bus stop, I would actually hide in the underground tunnel until the bus had gone. And then I would walk back down to the house, and of course then she would have to take me to school, which really, in looking back on the whole situation, was not a good situation either, because then you got abused for making her go out of her way to take you to school, you know.
So, was she arranging that? And again, you're perceiving it now as an adult.
I believe she was. At the time, I did not realize that. But looking back in the whole situation and the whole scenario, I honestly believe she was arranging it. And I didn't know that, and I don't, it's not in the book because I didn't write that yet. But I didn't know it until I was a teenager in high school, when I was dating somebody. And at this point in time, we had left that family because we ended up in foster care, but I had actually come back for a very short time to live with them. And I was dating this guy, and I was telling her about it one day. Well, the very next day, I went to school, and my life was a turmoil, because what had happened is she had gotten in touch with the bus driver, my old bus driver, who was now his bus driver. And he told everybody on that bus what he used to do to me. And everybody at my school now knew that all these horrible things had happened. And yet he was bragging about it.
I was going to say, wasn't he afraid of repercussions or something?
I don't understand. But I was so ashamed. Like, immediately the guy no longer dated me. You know, there was no connection there anymore. And my life had just gone right back into turmoil. Again, it was that whole thing about these people you learn to trust and you learn to communicate with, and all of a sudden you can't talk to them because somehow it gets back to the other people, and then that causes more turmoil. It was always a life of turmoil. Like, you just never knew who you could trust and who you couldn't, and so you just learned to trust nobody.
Right. Let's stop there.